I once watched a Harvard graduate lose $50,000 on a can't-miss investment while my neighbor with a high school diploma quietly built a $1 million portfolio. Why do smart people often make terrible money decisions? In this video, I'm breaking down the shocking psychology behind why your intelligence might actually be working against you financially. If you've ever made a money move you later regretted, despite knowing better, you're experiencing the exact cognitive biases we'll solve today. The intelligence paradox. Why being smart can make you worse with money. Did you know that doctors, lawyers, and engineers are often terrible with their money? Let's find out why your education might be working against you financially. It sounds completely backwards, right? The people who spent years in graduate school, aced complicated exams, and earned six-figure salaries are somehow making rookie money mistakes. But it's true, and the research backs it up. A study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that people with higher IQs aren't necessarily better at managing their finances. In fact, many highly educated professionals fall into the same financial traps as everyone else, sometimes even worse ones. Doctors, for example, have an average net worth only about half of what it should be given their income levels. They're smart enough to diagnose rare diseases, but somehow miss the financial bleeding in their own wallets. So what's going on here? How can someone smart enough to design a bridge or perform brain surgery make such basic financial blunders? The truth is, the very thinking patterns that make someone successful in their specialized field can backfire when it comes to money. Take analytical professionals like engineers and scientists. Their training teaches them to seek perfect solutions through complex analysis. That's great for designing aircraft, but terrible for investing. They often overthink investment decisions, constantly searching for the perfect stock or the optimal entry point. This analysis paralysis keeps them on the sidelines during bull markets or leads to excessive tinkering with their portfolios. Meanwhile, lawyers are trained to find problems and risks in everything. This hypervigilance serves them well in the courtroom, but can lead to extreme risk aversion with money. I've seen attorneys keeping hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash because they're so focused on what could go wrong with investments that they miss the guaranteed loss to inflation. The examples are everywhere. Take the case of a renowned surgeon in Boston who lost over $2 million in a biotech investment scheme. His medical expertise gave him false confidence in understanding the biotech industry. Or consider the group of NASA engineers who collectively lost millions in a cryptocurrency scam because they believed their technical backgrounds qualified them to evaluate the underlying technology. This overspecialization creates massive blind spots. A dentist might know everything about molars, but nothing about mortgages. They've spent decades becoming experts in one narrow field, leaving little time to develop financial literacy. And here's where it gets really interesting. Many highly educated professionals think they understand finance better than they actually do. This is what psychologists call the competence transference effect. We unconsciously assume our expertise in one area transfers to others. The physics professor assumes her analytical skills that work for quantum mechanics will work just as well for stock picking. The attorney believes his ability to parse legal contracts means he can evaluate complex financial derivatives. But finance isn't just another academic subject you can master through raw intelligence. It's a practical discipline heavily influenced by psychology, emotion, and uncertainty, areas where pure intellectual horsepower doesn't necessarily help. In fact, many highly educated professionals fall into a dangerous cycle. When they make financial mistakes, they're more likely to create elaborate justifications for those errors. A doctor who buys an overpriced house doesn't just admit it was a bad move. They create a complex rationalization about investment value and future appreciation potential. Their analytical minds become their own worst enemies, constructing intellectual frameworks to justify emotional decisions. Here's another surprising finding. People with less formal education sometimes make better financial choices because they're more likely to recognize their limitations and seek advice. They don't have the same intellectual pride that prevents many experts from admitting what they don't know. The data tells the story clearly. A study from TIACREF found that professors, literally professional experts, were more likely than average workers to make poor retirement allocation choices. Another study showed that doctors were more likely than the general population to fall. For investment scams, losing an average of $250,000 per victim. This helps explain why we see so many financially struggling professionals. The neurologist driving a Tesla but drowning in student debt. The corporate attorney living in $1 million home but with nothing saved for retirement. The engineering manager who can't figure out why they never have money left at the end of the month despite earning twice the median household income. What's happening is a clash between domain-specific intelligence and general financial wisdom. Domain-specific intelligence is your expertise in your professional field, the specialized knowledge that makes you valuable at work. Financial wisdom, on the other hand, is a broader understanding of money principles, human psychology, and practical decision-making. One doesn't automatically translate to the other. In fact, expertise in one domain can create overconfidence that actually undermines performance in another. This is why some of the world's smartest people make the dumbest money moves. Throughout this video, we're going to explore the specific cognitive biases that trip up even the brightest minds. We'll look at how loss aversion causes smart people to hold losing investments way too long. How confirmation bias creates financial echo chambers where we only hear what we want to hear. How the sunk cost fallacy keeps us throwing good money after bad investments. And most importantly, we'll look at how overconfidence, that special curse of the highly educated, leads to financial disasters even among those who should know better. Loss aversion, the hidden tax on your financial future. What if I told you your brain is literally hardwired to make terrible investment decisions during market downturns? That gut-wrenching feeling when you see your portfolio drop isn't just unpleasant. It's actively sabotaging your financial future. While overconfidence might lead you to take excessive risks, loss aversion is the psychological trap that makes you play it too safe at precisely the wrong moments. Loss aversion isn't just some theoretical concept. It's a powerful neurological reality affecting your money moves every single day. Research by psychologists Kahneman and Tversky revealed something fascinating about our brains. The psychological pain of losing $100 feels roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining that same $100. This isn't a small quirk, it's a fundamental rewiring of how we evaluate financial decisions. Think about that for a second. Your brain literally processes losses and gains on completely different scales. When you lose money, your brain's fear centers light up like a Christmas tree. Those same neurological pathways that kept our ancestors alive when facing predators are now activating when you see red numbers in your investment account. Brain imaging studies have captured this in real time. Your amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes much more active when facing potential financial losses than when anticipating equivalent gains. This made perfect sense in our evolutionary past. Our ancient ancestors who were extra cautious about losses, like food, shelter, or safety, survived to pass on their genes. The problem? This Stone Age wiring is making a mess of your modern financial decisions. Here's where things get really interesting and financially dangerous. Loss aversion doesn't just affect how you feel. It transforms how you act with your money. When markets drop, many investors panic sell at the worst possible moment, right at the bottom. During the 2022 bear market, countless investors couldn't handle the psychological pain of seeing their accounts drop. They sold their investments at steep discounts, locking in those losses permanently and missing the eventual recovery. This psychological glitch creates a brutal financial paradox. The very moments when buying investments is objectively the smartest move, when prices are low, feels subjectively like the most dangerous time to invest. Your emotional brain screams danger, precisely when the rational move would be to see opportunity. Loss aversion also explains why many people hold onto losing investments far too long, hoping they'll break even. You've probably done this yourself, keeping a tanking stock because selling would make the loss real. Meanwhile, you're quick to sell winners, locking in small gains while cutting off the potential for bigger returns. This sell winners, keep losers approach is exactly backward from optimal investing strategy, but loss aversion makes it feel right. The mathematics of investment returns makes this psychological bias even more costly. Let me show you why. If your investment loses 10%, you don't need a 10% gain to break even. You need 11.1%. A 20% loss? You'll need a 25% gain to recover. And if your investments drop 50%, like many did during the 2008 financial crisis, you need a whopping 100% gain just to get back to where you started. This mathematical reality, combined with loss aversion, creates a perfect storm that devastates investment returns. The fear of further losses causes panic selling at market bottoms, locking in those losses permanently and making the climb back to even steeper than it needed to be. Consider a real-world example. Real estate investors who sit on the sidelines during market dips. While property values are down and deals are abundant, loss aversion keeps many would-be investors paralyzed with fear. They can't pull the trigger on purchases that, in retrospect, would have been incredible opportunities. Their brains are so focused on avoiding potential losses that they completely miss massive potential gains. This psychological trap doesn't just affect experienced investors. If you've ever hesitated to invest your savings during market uncertainty, that's loss aversion at work. If you keep excessive amounts in cash because investing feels risky, loss aversion is likely the culprit. The problem is that playing it too safe has its own massive cost, the opportunity cost of growth you never capture. The financial impact of this bias over a lifetime of investing is staggering. An investor who gives in to loss aversion during market downturns, pulling money out when markets drop, and putting it back in only after recovery is well underway, will typically earn 2 to 4% less per year than someone who stays invested. That might not sound like much, but over 30 to 40 years of investing, it can literally cost you hundreds of thousands in lost wealth. Think about that. A psychological bias you probably didn't even know you had might be costing you the equivalent of a house or your entire retirement fund over your lifetime. What makes loss aversion particularly dangerous is how invisible it feels in the moment. When you're panic selling during a market crash, it doesn't feel like you're making a mistake driven by psychological bias. It feels like you're being prudent, protecting yourself from further losses. Your brain is exceptionally good at rationalizing these fear-based decisions. I'm just being careful, you tell yourself. I'll get back in when things settle down. But by the time things feel settled, the biggest gains of the recovery have already happened. Financial professionals aren't immune either. Even with years of training and experience, investment advisors and money managers fall into the loss aversion trap. During market downturns, client panic forces many advisors to sell positions against their better judgment. The psychological pressure becomes too intense, and they give in to preserve the client relationship, even when they know staying invested would be better long-term. So how can you fight back against this hardwired bias? Awareness is the first step, but you'll need more than that. The most successful investors create systems that automatically override these psychological tendencies. They use dollar-cost averaging to keep investing through downturns. They set rules about when to buy and sell based on objective criteria, not emotional reactions. They deliberately avoid checking their portfolio values during volatile periods, knowing that each peak will trigger loss aversion responses. Risk assessment tools can be another powerful ally. These questionnaires help measure your psychological comfort zone with investment risk, giving you a clearer picture of your loss aversion tendencies. Understanding your personal risk profile allows you to build an investment strategy that you can actually stick with through market turbulence. Remember those fMRI studies showing heightened brain activity during potential losses? This suggests a fascinating solution, creating psychological distance between yourself and your investment decisions during market volatility. Some investors use financial advisors specifically for this reason, to put a buffer between their emotional reactions and their investment decisions. Confirmation bias. Your financial blind spots are bigger than you think. Creating psychological distance with a financial advisor is a smart strategy, but there's another mental trap that could be quietly sabotaging your financial future. Ever notice how you seem to find evidence supporting whatever investment decisions you've already made? That's not coincidence. Your brain has a built-in filtering system that's potentially costing you thousands. Financial confirmation bias is like wearing glasses that only show you what you want to see. When you believe a particular stock is going to perform well, suddenly you notice all the positive news articles about that company while mentally discarding the negative ones. Your brain isn't being neutral. It's actively curating your financial reality. This psychological tendency runs surprisingly deep in our financial lives. That study of online stock trading forums revealed something alarming. About 85% of investors predominantly click on information that confirms what they already believe about their investments. Even more telling, 70% of investors with strong, by opinions actively seek out messages that support their existing position. Your brain is literally filtering your financial perception without you realizing it. Think about your favorite investment right now. Can you easily list 3 compelling reasons why it might be a bad idea? Most people struggle with this exercise because their brains have been quietly building a one-sided case file, collecting supporting evidence while conveniently losing the contradictory information. What makes this bias particularly dangerous is how it creates financial echo chambers. The more you research an investment you're already committed to, the more convinced you become. Not because the evidence is necessarily stronger, but because you're subconsciously filtering out anything that challenges your position. It's like having a biased research assistant who only brings you the good news and accidentally shreds the warnings. Social media algorithms make this problem exponentially worse. These platforms don't show you a balanced view. They show you what keeps you engaged. If you've been researching cryptocurrency investments, your feeds will flood with crypto success stories and bullish predictions, creating a dangerous illusion that everyone shares your optimistic outlook. Meanwhile, the algorithms quietly filter out cautionary tales and skeptical analyses that might have protected your portfolio. The financial impact of this bias goes beyond just bad stock picks. Let's say you're particularly bullish on tech stocks because you work in the industry. Your confirmation bias might lead you to build a portfolio heavily concentrated in tech companies. You'll find endless articles supporting your tech-heavy strategy while dismissing warnings about sector concentration. When the inevitable tech correction comes, your lack of diversification will amplify your losses far beyond what a balanced portfolio would have experienced. But confirmation bias doesn't just affect which stocks you buy. It influences your entire financial life. Consider your monthly spending habits. If you believe you're generally good with money, you'll likely remember the times you passed on an unnecessary purchase while conveniently forgetting the 4 impulse buys from last week. Your brain selectively builds evidence supporting your self-image as a responsible spender, even as your credit card balance tells a different story. The same distortion happens with budgeting. You might be convinced your dining out spending is reasonable, so you mentally highlight the meals you skipped while downplaying the expensive dinners. When reviewing your budget, those expensive outings somehow don't seem representative of your normal spending, even though they happen with alarming regularity. What makes confirmation bias especially insidious is that the more financially educated you are, the more skillfully your brain can rationalize your biased thinking. An amateur investor might say, "I just have a good feeling about this stock." But a sophisticated investor constructs elaborate, data-filled arguments that appear objective while subtly filtering evidence to support their pre-existing position. So how do you combat a bias you can't even see? Start by adopting a financial version of the scientific method. Good scientists don't try to prove their hypotheses, they actively try to disprove them. Before making any investment decision, force yourself to articulate the strongest possible case against it. What would someone who disagrees with you point to as evidence? What warning signs might exist that you're not giving proper weight? Try this practical exercise. For your next major financial decision, create 2 separate research documents. In one, list every reason supporting your decision. In the other, list every reason against it. Force yourself to make both lists equally long and compelling. This simple practice can break the confirmation bias cycle by ensuring you give contradictory evidence a fair hearing. Another powerful technique is seeking out respected voices who disagree with your financial perspective. If you're bullish on a particular investment approach, find the smartest, most credible person who argues against it. Don't read their arguments looking for flaws. Read them with genuine openness, assuming they might be right. This intellectual humility creates space for a more balanced financial perspective. Financial advisors can help here too, but not just any advisor. Look for one who has a track record of challenging clients' assumptions rather than simply implementing their wishes. A yes-man advisor actually amplifies your confirmation bias, while a thoughtfully skeptical one provides a valuable counterbalance to your natural tendencies. When reviewing financial information, pay attention to your emotional reactions. Do you feel a subtle satisfaction when reading information that supports your existing beliefs? Do you feel a slight resistance or discomfort when encountering contradictory information? These emotional responses are often signposts pointing to your confirmation bias in action. Ask yourself these pointed questions regularly. What evidence am I ignoring that contradicts my financial beliefs? And am I only seeking information that supports my current investment strategy? These reflective moments can help uncover the blind spots your brain naturally creates. The most successful investors aren't necessarily those with the most information. They're those who can look at financial information objectively, giving appropriate weight to both confirming and contradictory evidence. Warren Buffett's partner Charlie Munger famously said, "I never allow myself to have an opinion on anything that I don't know the other side's argument better than they do." That intellectual discipline is the perfect antidote to confirmation bias. The sunk cost fallacy. Why you can't let go of bad financial decisions. Charlie Munger's wisdom about understanding opposing arguments won't help when you're emotionally invested in a financial sinking ship. Ever finished a terrible movie just because you paid for the ticket? That same psychological glitch makes smart people hang onto plummeting investments and waste thousands more trying to justify their initial decision rather than cutting their losses. This mental trap has a name, the sunk cost fallacy. It's our stubborn tendency to continue pouring resources into decisions based on what we've already invested, rather than evaluating the current value and future potential. And unlike confirmation bias, which requires intellectual discipline to overcome, the sunk cost fallacy hits you at an emotional level that can be much harder to fight. Think about that streaming service you've been paying for since 2020 but haven't watched in months. Or that expensive exercise equipment gathering dust in your garage. Or maybe it's that cryptocurrency you bought at its peak that's now worth a fraction of what you paid, but you can't bring yourself to sell because then the loss becomes real. The sunk cost fallacy makes otherwise rational people make completely irrational decisions. Why? Because we've been culturally programmed to believe that quitting is failure and persistence always pays off. Don't give up. Stick with it. Finish what you started. These mantras serve us well in many areas of life, but can absolutely destroy our finances when applied blindly. Let me share a quick example. My friend Jake started a small coffee shop with his life savings of $50,000. After 6 months, the business was losing money every week. When I asked why he didn't cut his losses and try something else, his answer was telling. "I can't quit now. I've already put so much into this place." 2 years later, he had burned through another $100,000 in loans before finally closing. That's the sunk cost fallacy in action, throwing good money after bad. What's fascinating is how this plays out in everyday financial decisions too. Have you ever continued eating at a restaurant even though the food was terrible, just because you already paid for it? Or have you sat through a horrible movie instead of walking out, simply because you bought the ticket? In both cases, you're trading your most valuable resource, time, for something that provides no value, all because of money that's already gone. The sunk cost fallacy gets its power from a deadly cocktail of psychological forces. First, there's loss aversion, that innate fear of taking a loss that we discussed earlier. When you sell that failing investment, you're forced to confront the reality of your loss. As long as you hold on to it, you can maintain the pleasant fiction that it's just a paper loss, or it'll come back eventually. Second, there's commitment bias, our desire to appear consistent in our decisions and beliefs. Admitting a financial mistake feels like admitting we were wrong, which threatens our self-image as competent decision-makers. This is especially powerful for highly educated people who have built identities around being smart and making good choices. The sunk cost fallacy earned a dramatic nickname in economic circles, the Concorde fallacy. The British and French governments continued funding the supersonic Concorde aircraft project long after it became clear it would never be profitable. Why? Because they had already invested billions and couldn't bear to admit it was a financial failure. Sound familiar? It's the same reasoning that keeps you hanging on to that terrible stock that's down 70%. What makes this fallacy so dangerous is that it creates a vicious cycle. The more you invest, the more committed you become to the decision. The more committed you become, the more likely you are to invest even more. It's a financial death spiral that can drain your resources while better opportunities pass you by. Let's look at how this affects investors specifically. A study of individual investors found that many hold onto losing stocks far longer than winning ones. On average, selling winners 50% faster than losers. This behavior, sometimes called the disposition effect, directly contradicts rational investment strategy, which suggests cutting losses quickly and letting winners run. The real damage of the sunk cost fallacy isn't just in the initial poor decision. It's in all the opportunities you miss while your resources are tied up in that sinking ship. Every dollar trapped in a failing investment is a dollar that could be working for you somewhere else. So how do you catch yourself before falling into this trap? Here are 3 practical questions to ask yourself when making financial decisions. First, ask, what am I worried about losing? Often, it's not just money, but also your self-image as someone who makes good decisions. Recognizing this emotional component can help you separate the actual financial decision from your feelings about it. Second, ask, would I make this same investment if I were starting fresh today? This mental reset helps you evaluate the current value rather than anchoring to past decisions. If the answer is no, that's a strong signal you're hanging on due to sunk costs. Third, ask, am I making this decision based on what I've already invested or on future potential? This direct question forces you to confront the core of the sunk cost fallacy. The only thing that should matter is the future value of your options. These questions form a simple framework that can save you thousands in avoided financial mistakes. But implementing them requires something that doesn't come naturally: the willingness to cut your losses. Warren Buffett famously said, "The most important thing to do if you find yourself in a hole is to stop digging." This wisdom applies perfectly to sunk cost situations. Sometimes the bravest financial move is walking away, selling that losing investment, canceling that unused subscription, or closing that struggling business. And here's a perspective shift that might help. When you decide to cut your losses, you're not giving up. You're making a strategic reallocation of resources. You're not losing. You're choosing to play a different, better game. Think of it this way. Professional poker players don't struggle with folding a bad hand, even after putting chips in the pot. They know that playing a poor hand to its conclusion only compounds the error. Successful investors think the same way. They're not emotionally attached. Overconfidence bias, the financial expert's Achilles heel. Professional investors might avoid the sunk cost trap, but what happens when their very expertise becomes their biggest weakness? There's an intriguing psychological paradox at play where the more financially educated you become, the more susceptible you might be to a bias that's crashed hedge funds and bankrupted banks. It's called overconfidence bias, and it's particularly dangerous because it gets worse with experience, not better. Let me paint you a picture that might seem familiar. You've done your research on a stock. You've read the quarterly reports, analyzed the charts, and even listened to the earnings calls. You're convinced you've found a winner, so you invest heavily. When the stock starts to drop, you don't just hold, you double down. After all, you know what you're doing, right? This is the overconfidence bias in action, and it's costing investors billions. What exactly is overconfidence bias? It's our tendency to overestimate our knowledge, abilities, and the accuracy of our predictions. Think of it as the financial equivalent of believing you're an above-average driver, a statistical impossibility when everyone thinks the same way. In investing, this translates to believing we can consistently beat the market, time our entries and exits perfectly, or select winning stocks with incredible accuracy. Here's where things get really interesting. Education and expertise often make this bias worse, not better. A shocking study by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority found that 64% of investors rated their financial knowledge as high. Yet most of these same investors consistently underperformed the market. The more you learn about finance, the more likely you are to believe you've mastered it, creating a dangerous disconnect between perceived and actual ability. This is essentially the Dunning-Kruger effect playing out in your portfolio. This cognitive bias shows that people with limited knowledge in a domain overestimate their competence. But in finance, there's a twist. Even experts with extensive knowledge fall into this trap, believing their specialized understanding gives them predictive powers the market simply doesn't allow. Consider what happened to long-term capital management, a hedge fund led by Nobel Prize-winning economists and Wall Street veterans. Their sophisticated models and expertise led them to believe they could predict market movements with mathematical precision. When Russia defaulted on its debt in 1998, an event their models deemed statistically impossible, the fund lost $4.6 billion in just 4 months and nearly collapsed the global financial system. Their expertise didn't protect them. It made them dangerously overconfident. This isn't just a problem for institutional investors. Individual investors display this bias through excessive trading, another symptom of overconfidence. Research shows that overconfident investors trade 1.5 to 2 times more frequently than their more cautious counterparts, yet earn significantly lower returns. Each trade comes with costs and tax implications, slowly eroding wealth while reinforcing the illusion of control. What makes overconfidence so destructive is how it manifests in our investment behavior. First, it leads to inadequate diversification. When you're convinced you found a winner, why spread your bets? This concentration amplifies both gains and losses, but the losses tend to be more permanent and devastating. Second, overconfidence drives excessive risk-taking. When you believe you can predict the future, you discount the possibility of negative outcomes. This is why highly educated investors sometimes take on leverage or options positions that can magnify losses beyond their tolerance level. Third, overconfident investors often fail at contingency planning. They're so focused on their predicted outcome that they don't prepare for what happens if they're wrong. Without a backup plan or exit strategy, losses compound quickly when the market moves against their position. But perhaps most dangerous is how overconfidence interacts with other biases we've discussed. It amplifies confirmation bias. When you're confident in your analysis, you're more likely to seek out information that supports your view. It worsens the sunk cost fallacy. When you're confident in your initial decision, you're more likely to throw good money after bad. And it intensifies loss aversion. When losses do occur despite your confidence, the psychological impact is even more severe. Think about it this way. A novice investor might make mistakes due to inexperience, but they're also more likely to recognize their limitations and seek help. An overconfident expert believes they don't need help, often ignoring warning signs and expert advice that contradicts their views. So how can we protect ourselves from this financial blind spot? The first step is conducting what experts call a pre-mortem exercise. Before making any significant investment, imagine that it has failed spectacularly 1 year into the future. What went wrong? What factors did you miss? This mental time travel forces you to consider outcomes your overconfidence might be blocking. Another powerful technique is keeping a decision journal. For every major financial decision, write down your reasoning, expectations, and confidence level. Later, you can review these entries against actual outcomes. This creates a feedback loop that calibrates your confidence over time by showing you exactly how accurate your predictions really are. Perhaps most importantly, we need to distinguish between areas where skill matters and areas dominated by luck. In highly skilled domains like chess, practice and expertise lead to better outcomes. But financial markets involve so many unknowable variables that even experts can't consistently predict short-term movements. Recognizing this limitation isn't admitting defeat, it's acknowledging reality. This is why many successful investors like Warren Buffett advocate for index investing for most people. It's not that active investing can't work. It's that the overconfidence required to believe you can consistently beat the market leads to behaviors that virtually guarantee underperformance. The most dangerous aspect of overconfidence is that it feels good. Being confident in your financial decisions doesn't trigger warning bells. It feels like competence. This is why even seasoned professionals fall victim to it repeatedly. The emotional reward of feeling in control is immediate, while the financial consequences play out slowly over time. This disconnect between perception and reality explains why brilliant fund managers sometimes make catastrophic decisions that average investors avoid. Their specialized knowledge creates blind spots rather than clarity, leading them to dismiss risks that more cautious investors would find obvious. The emotional intelligence solution, building self-awareness in your financial life. While knowledge might create dangerous blind spots, there's another dimension of intelligence that Wall Street rarely talks about, yet might be the true secret to financial success. What if your emotional awareness matters more for your money than all your investment knowledge combined? Let's face it, most financial education is obsessed with technical knowledge. Everywhere you look, experts are pushing complex investment strategies, advanced tax planning, and sophisticated portfolio allocation. But here's what they're missing. Even the most brilliant financial strategies fall apart when our emotions take the wheel. This explains why so many people with perfect knowledge of what they should do still make terrible money moves. They've gotten really good at the math, but completely ignored the psychology. The truth: your brain isn't a calculator. It's an emotional organ first and foremost. Financial emotional intelligence isn't some fluffy concept. It's the missing piece that determines whether your financial knowledge ever translates into actual wealth. Think about it. What good is knowing about compound interest if fear prevents you from investing in the first place? Let's break down the 4 key components of emotional intelligence and see how each directly impacts your financial life. First up is self-awareness, your ability to recognize what you're feeling in real time. In the financial world, this means catching yourself when money decisions trigger powerful emotions. Are your palms sweating when you check your portfolio during market volatility? Do you feel a rush of excitement before making an impulse purchase? These physical and emotional reactions are critical signals that your rational brain is about to get hijacked. I recently spoke with a financial advisor who asks his new clients to identify their physical responses to financial stress. One client realized she always got a headache before making major money decisions, a clear warning sign that her emotions were in overdrive. Once she recognized this pattern, she could pause and regain her emotional balance before proceeding. The second component is self-regulation, your ability to manage those emotions once you've identified them. This is crucial during market downturns when panic selling can destroy years of careful investing. Self-regulation doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means acknowledging them without letting them dictate your actions. Consider implementing a cooling-off period before making any financial decision that triggers strong emotions. For smaller purchases, this might be 24 hours. For larger ones, perhaps a week. This simple buffer creates space between the emotional trigger and your response, allowing your rational brain to regain control. The third component, social awareness, might seem less obviously connected to finance, but it's actually critical. This involves understanding the emotions and needs of others, which becomes essential when navigating financial relationships. Whether you're negotiating salary, discussing money with a partner, or working with financial professionals, picking up on others' emotional cues gives you valuable information about the true dynamics at play. Many marriage counselors report that conflicts about money are rarely just about dollars and cents. They're about deeper emotional needs like security, independence, or status. Developing social awareness helps you recognize what's really driving financial disagreements and address the underlying concerns rather than just arguing about the numbers. The fourth component is relationship management, using your emotional awareness to build and maintain healthy financial relationships. This might mean communicating clearly with family members about money values, setting appropriate boundaries with friends around spending, or effectively collaborating with financial advisors. A fascinating example comes from a study of successful entrepreneurs who attributed their business growth not to financial acumen, but to their ability to build genuine connections with customers, investors, and team members. Their relationship skills directly translated into financial results that purely analytical approaches couldn't achieve. So how do you practically develop this financial emotional intelligence? One powerful technique is keeping a financial decision journal. After each significant money choice, record not just what you decided, but how you felt before, during, and after the decision. Were you anxious? Excited? Pressured? Over time, you'll start noticing patterns in your emotional triggers and how they influence your choices. A client who tried this discovered she consistently made her worst investment decisions when feeling competitive with a colleague. Once she recognized this pattern, she could catch herself when that competitive feeling arose and postpone any financial moves until a clearer emotional state prevailed. Mindfulness practices are another game changer for financial emotional intelligence. Simple techniques like deep breathing or body scans can pull you out of emotional reactivity and back into the present moment. Before checking your investment accounts during market volatility, try taking 5 deep breaths. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, counteracting the fight or flight response that leads to panic selling. Even a basic meditation practice of 5 to 10 minutes daily can strengthen your ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without immediately reacting to them. This creates crucial space between stimulus and response, between market drops and selling, between desire and purchasing, between fear and financial paralysis. The transformative potential here is enormous. Imagine approaching your finances not with anxiety, impulsivity, or greed, but with emotional clarity and balance. Every financial choice becomes an opportunity to practice awareness rather than a trigger for stress or regret. A fascinating element of financial emotional intelligence is how it creates a positive feedback loop. As you develop greater awareness, you make better decisions, which leads to better outcomes, which further reinforces your confidence in your ability to manage both your emotions and your money effectively. Consider implementing a simple practice. Before making any financial decision, Ask yourself, what emotion is driving this choice right now? Just naming the emotion, I'm feeling insecure, or I'm feeling greedy, can immediately reduce its unconscious power over your decision-making. When you combine emotional awareness with practical financial knowledge, you create a powerful synergy that neither component can achieve alone. Your technical understanding provides the roadmap, while your emotional intelligence ensures you can actually follow it even when the terrain gets rough. The 2-minute pause, a simple technique to short-circuit financial mistakes. That powerful synergy between emotional awareness and financial knowledge is crucial, but it often vanishes in those high-pressure moments when you're about to make a financial decision. Did you know that your brain's emotional center can actually hijack your decision-making process up to 20 seconds before your rational brain even realizes what's happening? This tiny window of time between impulse and action might be the most valuable asset in your financial toolkit. Let's talk about a remarkably simple technique that could prevent your next major money mistake: the 2-minute pause. It's exactly what it sounds like. Before making any significant financial decision, you pause for just 120 seconds. This brief moment of reflection creates critical space between your emotional impulse and your final choice. What makes this technique so powerful is the way our brains are actually structured. Your financial decisions are processed by two distinct systems that work at different speeds. The limbic system, including the amygdala, is your emotional command center. It reacts instantaneously to financial triggers, whether that's a flash sale notification or a plunging stock market. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making, takes longer to activate and analyze the situation properly. This timing gap explains why smart people still make impulsive financial decisions. When you're stressed about money, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, flooding your system with stress hormones that cloud your judgment. These hormones literally make it harder for your rational brain to function optimally. Your limbic system screams, "Buy now before it's gone," or "Sell everything before you lose more," while your prefrontal cortex is still methodically working through the pros and cons. The 2-minute pause works by deliberately creating a buffer between these systems. It's like giving your rational brain a head start in the race against your emotions. Neuroscience research shows that even a brief pause can significantly reduce the influence of those initial emotional reactions, allowing your prefrontal cortex to catch up and weigh in on the decision. So how exactly do you implement this 2-minute pause? Let's break it down into a simple framework you can use immediately. First, recognize the trigger. Whenever you feel that rush to make a financial decision, whether it's clicking add to cart online or calling your broker to sell investments during a market dip, that's your cue to pause. Literally set a timer for 2 minutes on your phone. Next, take 3 deep breaths. This might sound silly, but it's actually backed by solid science. Deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts those stress hormones flooding your system. Your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops, and your body physically returns to a state where clearer thinking is possible. Now ask yourself these specific questions. What am I worried about losing right now? This question helps identify the fear driving your decision. Fear of missing out on a deal. Fear of losing more money in the market. Once you've named your fear, it immediately loses some of its power over you. Follow this with, how might this fear be holding me back from making a rational decision? This creates distance between you and your emotional response, allowing you to observe rather than be controlled by it. Then ask, what would I advise a friend to do in this exact situation? This perspective shift is remarkably effective at cutting through emotional fog. We're often wiser when advising others than when making our own decisions. Finally, reconnect with your larger financial goals. Ask yourself, how does this decision align with my long-term financial plan? This final question anchors your decision in your broader objectives rather than momentary emotions. The beauty of this technique is its scalability. For smaller decisions like impulse purchases, a simplified 30-second version might be sufficient. Just recognize the trigger, take a breath, and ask if this purchase aligns with your values. For major financial decisions like buying a home or making a significant investment, you might extend this to a 24-hour or even 48-hour pause, giving yourself time to sleep on the decision and consult trusted advisors. Technology can be both your ally and enemy in implementing this pause. On one hand, shopping apps and investment platforms are designed to create urgency and emotional responses. They use countdown timers, limited time offers, and real-time price movements to bypass your rational thinking. But technology can also support your pause strategy. Consider installing browser extensions that enforce waiting periods before purchases, or setting up two-factor authentication on investment accounts to create natural pauses before transactions. Some investment platforms now offer built-in cooling-off periods that allow you to set rules like hold all sell orders for 24 hours during market volatility. These automated guardrails protect you from your most impulsive self. Similarly, you can create email folders for shopping promotional emails, checking them only at scheduled times rather than responding immediately to flash sale notifications. What's particularly powerful about the 2-minute pause is its compounding effect over time. Financial decisions rarely exist in isolation. Each choice influences the next. When you implement this technique consistently, you're not just improving individual decisions, but creating a healthier pattern of financial behavior. Your brain actually begins to form new neural pathways, making thoughtful decision-making your default mode rather than the exception. Let me share a practical framework for using the 2-minute pause with different financial decision types. For everyday purchases, under $100, simply ask, if I delay this purchase for 24 hours, will I still want it tomorrow? This quick check significantly reduces impulse buying. For medium financial decisions, $100 to $1,000, use the full 2-minute framework we discussed, particularly focusing on how the purchase aligns with your monthly budget and short-term financial goals. For major financial decisions, over $1,000, extend the pause to at least 24 hours and use that time to gather additional information, consult with unbiased advisors, and evaluate multiple options side by side. For investment decisions during market volatility, implement a mandatory 48-hour cooling-off period before making any significant portfolio changes. This single rule has saved countless investors from panic selling at market bottoms. The most exciting aspect of this technique is how it bridges the gap between your emotional intelligence and your financial knowledge. You already know what you should do with your money, but the 2-minute pause helps ensure you actually do it, even when emotions are running high. Behavioral finance research consistently shows that investors who take time to evaluate their decisions before acting are significantly less likely to make costly emotional mistakes. Just as a small rudder can change the direction of a massive ship, this tiny intervention in your decision-making frameworks can dramatically alter your financial trajectory over time. Financial self-control is like a muscle that eventually gets tired, no matter how strong your 2-minute pause technique becomes. But what if you never had to make those emotionally charged decisions in the first place? The wealthiest and most financially secure people rarely rely on in-the-moment willpower. Instead, they build decision frameworks that make the right choices inevitable, bypassing their cognitive biases before they even kick in. Let's be honest, willpower is overrated when it comes to money. No matter how disciplined you are, your brain faces thousands of decisions each day, leading to what psychologists call decision fatigue. By the time you're deciding whether to invest that bonus or splurge on a new gadget, your mental energy is already depleted. This is why even the most determined people struggle with consistent financial choices. Decision frameworks offer a powerful alternative. These are essentially pre-committed systems that remove the emotional component from your financial decisions entirely. Think of them as a financial autopilot. They keep you on course regardless of how you feel in the moment. So what exactly does a financial decision framework look like? At its core, it's a set of predefined rules that guide your financial choices without requiring constant deliberation. These systems can be applied to every aspect of your financial life, from investing to daily spending. For investors, a systematic approach eliminates the guesswork and emotional roller coaster that typically accompanies market movements. Imagine having clear criteria for when to buy and sell investments, not based on CNBC headlines or what your brother-in-law recommends, but on rational metrics you've established in advance. This might include predefined rules for portfolio rebalancing, specific entry and exit points for investments, or automatic investment schedules that continue regardless of market conditions. One of the most powerful investment frameworks is automated regular investing. By setting up automatic transfers on payday that go straight into diversified investments, you completely bypass the should I invest now or wait for a better time dilemma that paralyzes so many people. The system makes the right decision for you, eliminating the psychological battle altogether. For day-to-day finances, effective budgeting frameworks like the 50/20/30 rule provide clear guidelines that reduce decision fatigue. Instead of agonizing over every purchase, you simply allocate 50% of your income to necessities, 20% to savings and investments, and 30% to discretionary spending. This creates boundaries that prevent endless deliberation while giving you freedom within those boundaries. The beauty of these frameworks is that they're entirely customizable based on your specific vulnerability to different biases. Are you particularly susceptible to loss aversion? Your framework might include rules about not checking your investment accounts during market volatility. Do you struggle with the sunk cost fallacy? Create a decision rule that forces you to evaluate investments solely on future potential, not past investment. Digital tools have made implementing these frameworks easier than ever. Modern robo-advisors process vast amounts of market data and provide recommendations tailored to your risk tolerance and time horizon, all without emotional interference. These platforms can automatically rebalance your portfolio, reinvest dividends, and make tax-efficient decisions without requiring your constant attention or emotional input. But technology is just one piece of the puzzle. The real power comes from combining these tools with personalized decision criteria. This is where working with a financial advisor can be transformative. A good advisor doesn't just help pick investments. They help create a structured decision-making process that accounts for your specific cognitive tendencies. Think about the last time you made a financial decision you later regretted. Chances are you were operating without a framework, making decisions based on how you felt in the moment. Financial advisors can help establish systematic processes for everything from trading to rebalancing, ensuring consistency even when emotions run high. What makes these frameworks so effective is that they transform abstract financial principles into concrete actions. Instead of saying, "I should probably save more," your framework might specify 15% of every paycheck automatically transfers to my investment account on the 1st and 15th of each month. There's no decision to make, no willpower required. The right choice happens automatically. One of the most powerful frameworks combines automation with clear boundaries. For example, you might automate your core savings and investments while giving yourself a guilt-free spending account. This balance provides both structure and freedom, the important. Financial priorities happen automatically, while you maintain flexibility for discretionary spending without constant guilt or analysis paralysis. Consider how this might work in practice. Sarah, a software engineer, used to stress about investing. Market volatility would trigger anxiety, leading her to make emotional decisions, buying high out of FOMO or selling low out of fear. After implementing a decision framework, she automated 20% of her income to go directly into a diversified portfolio. She established rules that she would only review her investments quarterly, and any adjustments would follow predefined criteria based on her asset allocation targets, not market headlines or emotional reactions. The result? Her net worth grew steadily while her financial anxiety plummeted. The framework didn't just improve her returns. It transformed her relationship with money by eliminating hundreds of stressful decisions. For those concerned about losing control, remember that you designed the framework. You're not surrendering your financial future. You're protecting it from your own worst tendencies. Think of it as your rational brain creating guardrails for your emotional brain. Another powerful element of decision frameworks is accountability. By sharing your framework with a trusted advisor or financial accountability partner, you create an additional layer of protection against impulsive decisions. When you're tempted to break your own rules, having someone who can remind you of your rational pre-commitments can be invaluable. Many successful investors use decision checklists, another powerful framework tool. Before making any significant financial move, they consult a predetermined list of questions designed to counter their known biases. Questions like, what evidence would prove my investment thesis wrong? Or would I make this same decision if the market had moved in the opposite direction yesterday? Force a level of objectivity that's difficult to maintain in the heat of the moment. The benefits extend beyond just better returns. Decision frameworks free up substantial mental bandwidth. The average person makes an estimated 35,000 decisions daily, with many related to money. By automating these choices through frameworks, you reclaim mental energy for other areas of life, while paradoxically improving your financial outcomes. This approach isn't just for wealthy investors. In fact, those with limited resources benefit even more from decision frameworks because they have less room for financial error. Simple automatized savings plans, spending rules, and systematic debt repayment strategies can transform financial outcomes regardless of income level. The most compelling reason to adopt decision frameworks is their effectiveness compared to willpower alone. Studies consistently show that environments and systems beat willpower every time. Rather than fighting an uphill battle against your brain's hardwired biases, decision frameworks change the environment in which choices occur, making optimal decisions the path of least resistance. Real-world applications, from theory to financial practice. Frameworks are powerful in theory, but what do they actually look like when you're in the car dealership being pressured by a salesperson or weighing whether to invest in a friend's startup? Your brain processes financial decisions differently in these real-world pressure cookers, where emotions and social dynamics collide with rationality. Let's bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application by exploring how these bias-fighting techniques work in everyday money situations. Home buying represents one of the most emotionally charged financial decisions most people make. The average home buyer tours just 4 properties before making an offer, often the largest financial commitment of their life. Without a framework, buyers frequently fall victim to the love at first sight syndrome, making offers above their predetermined budget because of an emotional connection to a property. Instead, consider how a bias-aware buyer approaches this differently. They create a detailed property scorecard with weighted criteria before viewing any homes. Each property gets scored objectively across categories like location, condition, price per square foot, and potential appreciation. By committing to this framework in advance, they can compare properties rationally rather than being swayed by superficial features like staged furniture or fresh paint. When working with real estate agents, the bias-aware buyer also recognizes the inherent conflict of interest. Agents earn more when you spend more. They counter this by researching comparable sales independently and bringing a neutral third party, perhaps a financially savvy friend, to viewings who isn't emotionally invested in the purchase. Career decisions present another financial minefield where behavioral finance principles shine. Consider the common scenario of weighing a higher-paying corporate job against a startup with equity but lower salary. Most people make this decision based on gut feeling or by simply comparing salary numbers. The framework approach looks different. A more structured decision-maker creates what I call a future scenarios matrix. This involves mapping multiple possible outcomes. Startup succeeds wildly, moderately, or fails. Corporate path leads to promotion, stagnation, or layoff, and assigning both probabilities and financial outcomes to each. By explicitly accounting for uncertainty and visualizing the range of possibilities, you avoid both overconfidence in the startup's prospects and excessive loss aversion that might keep you in a safe but suboptimal corporate role. Retirement planning offers perhaps the clearest example of how cognitive biases can derail even the most financially literate individuals. The psychological distance between our present and future selves makes it incredibly difficult to prioritize retirement savings. Studies in behavioral finance consistently show that we tend to view our future selves almost as strangers, making it easy to prioritize current spending over future security. The framework solution? Visualization exercises where you literally imagine your future self and write a letter from that perspective. Some forward-thinking financial advisors even use aging software to show clients what they'll look like in their 70s and 80s before discussing retirement planning. This bridges the psychological gap between present and future selves, making retirement needs feel more urgent and real. For day-to-day spending, the framework approach transforms abstract budgeting into concrete decision rules. Rather than the typical, I should spend less on dining out, which rarely works, a framework user creates specific trigger response plans. If I'm invited to a restaurant meal more than twice in 1 week, I'll suggest a coffee meetup or home-cooked meal instead. These if-then rules bypass the need for willpower in the moment because the decision has already been made. The magnitude of loss aversion's impact becomes particularly evident in investment decisions during market volatility. Remember that psychologically, the pain of losing is approximately 2.41 times more powerful than the pleasure of gaining. This explains why many investors panic sell during market downturns despite intellectually knowing they should stay the course. The framework solution leverages what behavioral scientists call commitment devices. This might involve setting up automatic investments that continue during downturns regardless of emotional reactions. Some sophisticated investors even draft personal investment constitutions that explicitly state, "I will not sell equities during market corrections of less than 20%," or "I will only rebalance my portfolio on predetermined dates regardless of market conditions." Working effectively with financial advisors requires understanding the behavioral biases that can affect both you and your advisor. The average client-advisor relationship suffers from significant information asymmetry and potential conflicts of interest that biases can exploit. A framework approach transforms this dynamic by establishing clear parameters for the relationship up front. A bias-aware client creates a financial advisor scorecard, systematically tracking advisor recommendations against benchmarks and documented rationales. They request that advisors explicitly address potential biases in their recommendations. What would make this recommendation wrong? What alternatives did you consider? This forces a level of metacognition that counteracts overconfidence on both sides. For entrepreneurs and small business owners, loss aversion and the sunk cost fallacy can be particularly devastating. Many continue pouring money into failing business ventures because they've already invested so much. The framework solution involves setting clear, measurable milestones before launching any business initiative, with predetermined decision points for continuing, pivoting, or shutting down. Successful entrepreneurs establish what venture capitalists call kill criteria, specific metrics that, if not met, trigger an automatic reevaluation or shutdown of the project. This removes the emotional burden of deciding when to cut losses and prevents the rationalization that often accompanies the sunk cost fallacy. The integration of behavioral finance principles introduces a more nuanced approach to wealth management. Rather than viewing financial decisions as purely mathematical exercises, we recognize the powerful psychological forces at play and create systems to work with, rather than against, our natural tendencies. A comprehensive bias-fighting system combines three essential elements. First, decision frameworks that establish rules and processes before emotional situations arise. Second, commitment devices that lock in good behavior and make it difficult to deviate when emotions run high. Third, strategic use of social accountability, sharing your frameworks with trusted advisors who can call you out when you're deviating from your own rules. When implemented consistently across your financial life, these techniques don't just improve individual decisions, they compound over time. A single bias-influenced investment mistake might cost you thousands, but a lifetime of systematic bias management can translate to hundreds of thousands or even millions in preserved wealth. Consider this practical example. Integrating loss aversion awareness into real estate investments helps investors overcome the fear that prevents decisive action in competitive markets. By acknowledging this tendency upfront and creating a scoring system for property evaluation, investors can make more objective decisions rather than being paralyzed by the fear of making poor choices. The neuroscience behind these real-world applications is compelling. When we create decision frameworks in advance, we're essentially allowing our prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought, to make decisions when it's not under pressure. Then when emotional situations arise, we've already created a path of least resistance that doesn't require fighting against our amygdala's fear response in the moment. Your financial blind spots, identifying your personal bias profile. Our prefrontal cortex might be armed with the best decision frameworks in the world, but that's only half the battle. What about the unique way your brain processes financial choices? Think about it. Have you ever wondered why you keep making the same money mistakes despite knowing better? That's because your personal bias profile operates like an invisible force field, filtering financial information in ways you don't even recognize. When it comes to financial decision-making, we're not all vulnerable to the same cognitive traps. Each of us has what I call a bias fingerprint, a unique combination of psychological blind spots shaped by our upbringing, personality traits, and life experiences. This fingerprint influences every money decision you make, whether you're aware of it or not. This is exactly why so much generic financial advice fails spectacularly. Those one-size-fits-all money tips you read about, they completely ignore your individual psychological makeup. It's like giving everyone the same prescription regardless of their specific health condition. It might help some people by chance, but for most, it won't address their actual needs. Self-assessment is the critical first step to identifying your personal bias profile. Financial advisors have long used risk assessment questionnaires to measure your comfort level with investment volatility, but these only scratch the surface. A more comprehensive approach involves reflecting on your emotional reactions to different financial scenarios. Do you feel anxious when markets drop even slightly? Do you get an adrenaline rush from making impulsive purchases? These emotional responses are clues to your dominant biases. Your cultural and family background plays a massive role in forming your bias profile. Did you grow up in a household where money was tight and every purchase was scrutinized? You might have developed heightened loss aversion as a protective mechanism. Or perhaps your parents were risk takers who frequently discussed investment opportunities at the dinner table. This could have shaped your attitude toward financial risk-taking, for better or worse. What's particularly fascinating is how these backgrounds create predictable patterns. Financial advisors often notice that clients from similar backgrounds display comparable bias patterns. For instance, those who experienced financial hardship in childhood may exhibit stronger mental accounting tendencies, strictly compartmentalizing money based on its source rather than seeing it as part of a complete financial picture. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. Receiving a tax refund feels like found money. That's acceptable to splurge on, while your regular paycheck is meant for bills and necessities. This mental accounting bias leads many people to treat their tax refund differently than they would the same amount of money from their regular income, often making less rational spending decisions as a result. Your educational background also influences your bias profile in surprising ways. Studies have revealed that higher educated individuals often demonstrate greater loss aversion than those with less formal education. This counterintuitive finding suggests that more knowledge doesn't necessarily lead to more rational financial behavior. It can sometimes amplify certain biases by giving you more sophisticated ways to justify emotional decisions. Let's look at common financial personalities and how biases typically cluster within them. The conservative preserver tends to be dominated by loss aversion and status quo bias. These individuals prioritize financial safety above all else, often keeping excessive cash reserves even during periods of high inflation when this strategy actively erodes their wealth. They miss growth opportunities because the emotional comfort of security outweighs potential gains. The impulsive optimizer frequently falls prey to overconfidence bias and recency bias. They chase investment trends, frequently switching strategies based on what's currently performing well. Their portfolio resembles a collection of past hot tips, rather than a coherent investment strategy. They often believe they can time markets despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The analytical overthinker suffers from analysis paralysis and confirmation bias. They research extensively before making decisions, but tend to seek out information that supports their existing viewpoint. Despite their thoroughness, they often miss time-sensitive opportunities while gathering just a bit more data before acting. The social comparer is primarily influenced by herding bias and relative wealth perception. They make financial decisions based on keeping up with peers rather than their actual financial goals. Their spending and investment choices are heavily influenced by what others in their social circle are doing, regardless of whether those choices align with their own financial situation. Self-awareness is critical for identifying which financial personality best describes you. This recognition isn't about labeling yourself, but about understanding your unique vulnerabilities so you can build appropriate safeguards into your financial decision-making process. Creating a personalized strategy to combat your specific biases requires tailored approaches. For the conservative preserver dominated by loss aversion, setting up automatic investments that dollar-cost average into markets removes the emotional burden of deciding when to invest. For the impulsive optimizer, implementing a mandatory 72-hour waiting period before making any investment change provides crucial cooling-off time. The analytical overthinker benefits from setting firm deadlines for financial decisions and seeking intentionally diverse perspectives before finalizing choices. Meanwhile, the social comparer might need to practice financial privacy, making a rule not to discuss specific investments or purchases with peers who trigger their comparative tendencies. Developing emotional intelligence around your financial decisions is particularly powerful. This involves recognizing your emotional responses to money situations in real time and understanding how these emotions might be steering you toward bias-driven decisions. When you feel anxiety during a market downturn or excitement about a new investment opportunity, pause to ask yourself, is this emotion leading me toward a decision aligned with my long-term financial plan, or is it pushing me toward a bias-driven reaction? The potential impact of understanding your bias profile can't be overstated. Most people go through life completely unaware of the psychological forces driving their financial decisions. They blame external factors for poor outcomes, the economy, bad luck, or unfair circumstances, without recognizing how their own bias patterns contributed to these results. The self-awareness that comes from identifying your personal bias fingerprint puts you firmly back in the driver's seat of your financial life. Based on research patterns, I can tell you that for most viewers watching this video, mental accounting is likely your most dangerous current bias. You're probably treating money differently depending on where it came from, spending bonuses more freely than regular income, hesitating to tap into certain accounts even when it makes mathematical sense, or keeping unnecessary barriers between different financial buckets. To combat this particular bias, try consolidating your view of your finances. Before your next financial decision, ask yourself, would I make the same choice if this money came from a different source? This simple question can help you recognize when you're falling into the mental accounting trap and redirect you toward more rational decision-making. We've covered a lot of ground in this video, but here's the truth. Intelligence alone won't save your finances. What really matters is psychological awareness. Recent research shows that about 40% of the value financial advisors provide is actually emotional support, helping clients navigate the psychological minefield of money decisions. This emotional component isn't just a nice bonus, it's essential. You can have all the financial knowledge in the world, but without systems to manage your psychological biases, you'll keep making the same mistakes. This week, I challenge you to implement just one bias-fighting technique we've discussed. Start with the 2-minute pause before your next financial decision. Give your rational brain time to catch up with your emotions. Remember, understanding your own psychology gives you a massive advantage over even the smartest investors who remain blind to their biases. Your financial